Welcome to today's gathering. We are starting to let people in.
And as we let people in, we're very, very grateful that you all are joining us here today. My name is Ola.
And I'm Fatima. And we have Staffan on as a Zoomi today.
Of course, you're all part of the IDG community. So warmly welcome to today's gathering. And just to get ourselves sort of landing in the space that we're going to share for this coming hour and a half or two, just invite you to take a few deeper breaths together. So you can choose to just soften your gaze or close your eyes and just take a few deep breaths together. Breathing in, breathing out, just in your own pace and time. Landing in this space. And I invite you to feel the beating of your heart. See if you can connect with the pace of your heartbeat. It'll become very clear as we go into today's session, the power of the breath and the connection to our common rhythm. So I want to also, as we now join together in this space, give us a chance to check in, have a check-in together, just to start to see each other's faces and also start to gauge our feelings. How do we enter into this space? And I thought of a question to check in with, which is, how do you connect to our common interconnectedness? How do you connect to our interconnectedness? Maybe the ways that you do it, your methods or practice. So just write in the chat. Usually these gatherings can become sort of chat storms, and feel free to use that just to get connected to each other as well during the gathering. Be lively, be present in the chat as well. So as people are still joining us, we invite you as well to check in with that question. How do you connect to our interconnectedness? And I'll hand it over to Fatima to introduce our contributors for today.
Yeah, and thank you, Ola. And I'm Fatima, for you who are joining. And assuming we have Staffan. And today we have borrowed the studio from Läkarmissionen, LM International. We're very grateful to be here. And I just want to make a small review, because this is the last gathering for this year. And we have been going through many subjects. The purpose of the gatherings is to massage the IDGs a little bit more and getting deeper into them and get connected to them in different ways. So that's why we have these gatherings every month. And I need to peek because there has been many. First, we started out with adult development, and then we went into our shadow sides. We talked about how can the IDGs be truly global. We went into how does system thinking work, and also awareness-based systems. Last time we talked about the learner mindset, and today we're going to talk about the human interconnectedness, the connection to ourselves, but also to others. And to help us today, I'm just going to hand it over to you, Radhika. And we have 3 speakers today, so maybe you can introduce us to all of you. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. I am Radhika Vachani, and with me today is Gerard, Scheenstra, and also Ruma, Biswas. I'm speaking to you, well, Ruma and I are speaking to you from Mumbai, and I'm really, really happy to be here today. I'm the founder of the Institute of Inner Wellbeing and Excellence, and I've been running an institute out of India, Mumbai, for the past 15 years. We're now focused in the States. And essentially, we've been focused on the work of inner well-being and development for 25 years now. And the reason I actually focused a lot of the work that I'm doing in India was because I wanted to bring the Eastern perspective of inner well-being to our journey as we move from our own sense of flourishing and the science of human flourishing, but also moving from this idea of me to a we culture as we start to address issues faced much more globally and by humanity. And the entire session today is about really bringing in the Eastern and Western perspective and going within ourselves and understanding the idea of self-care. And I'm just going to pass this on a moment to Ruma to say a few things as well about the work that she's doing.
Hi, everybody. Thanks, Radhika. I'm Ruma. I'm also based in Mumbai. My work traditionally or largely is with corporates, working with, I'm an executive coach and a leadership coach. Increasingly, I've moved more and more towards relationships and working with systemic relationships. And right now, a lot of my focus is on climate change and climate change coaching. It's a burning topic, we all know. And where does coaching fit into this burning topic? So that's where I work with climate change coaches. This interconnectedness, this topic that we're bringing in, is very, very close to my heart. Incidentally, Radhika and I, we met particularly at a very difficult time in my own life, where this connectedness, who am I, myself, the questions around self, and my own relationship with my own self was, I was exploring that piece. So that's where that's how Radhika and I know each other. Radhika, over to you.
Sorry, Gerard, would you like to take a minute and also introduce yourself?
I'm based in the Netherlands, actually. I don't know if people know where it is, and I live close to Nijmegen. So not in Amsterdam, what most people know, but in Nijmegen. So I'm same as Radhika and Ruma. I'm long in the space of coaching and helping teams and organizations who got stuck moving to a next phase, being also developed holistic thinking, mentally, physically, and spiritually. So I got my own experiences to heal myself in that way. And we are much in the space of me to we to all thinking and ego to we go kind of lines of thought. So that's where I'm coming from, and happy to be here, and happy also to be working with Radhika and so on. So that's hope we have a great afternoon. At least here it's afternoon.
So as we begin, I'd like to sort of start this conversation with a reference to the IDG framework, where we're actually looking at the 5 dimensions, which is being, thinking, relating, collaboration, and acting. And when I think of these 5 dimensions, it's interesting to me because a lot of our work has been based on these 5 dimensions. And in our own framework at the Institute of Inner Wellbeing, we're looking at human well-being from the perspective of human flourishing. So as all of us know, that we're moving away from this model of wellness to well-being to encompass the mind, the body, the emotions. And really, when we look at the field of positive psychology, mindfulness, and this idea of human flourishing, we're actually looking at three critical dimensions of well-being. The first being personal well-being, then there's social well-being, and there's cognitive well-being. And when I look at the IDG framework, we begin with this idea of the relationship to the self, and we're very much in agreement with that as the self and, self-care, personal well-being being the foundation of our journey as not only for individual flourishing, but for group and global flourishing and moving in this journey from me to we. And then we look at relating and collaboration, which really integrates with this idea of social well-being and building pro-social behaviors. And then finally moving into thinking and acting, which really refers to cognitive well-being and this idea of self-mastery, self-realization, and starting to take action where we start to care about, issues being faced by humanity as a whole. So really, I think what's instrumental in this discussion today is the need for self-care or positive well-being and developing pro-social behaviors as we move into this journey of interconnectedness.
I ask a quick question while I know we are getting into this interconnectedness piece. So there is something very useful and important that you brought in, which is self-care and relationship with our own selves. So Radhika, maybe that's a place that we can start with. What do we really mean by self-care and relationship with our own self?
Right. So I think, fundamentally, if I now go back to the Eastern perspective, we deal with this idea of ahimsa and non-violence, where we begin with non-violence to the self. And very clearly in the Eastern perspective in this journey, this idea of me, myself, and I, and really reaching a state where mentally, emotionally, and physically we are flourishing and starting to become aware of how we don't do justice or we harm ourselves, right? So when I look at this idea of personal well-being, we're looking at this idea of how do we start to evolve the mind, the body, and the emotions so that we're able to move into a state of flourishing. So in Eastern philosophy, this idea of the lotus flower, right? That not only that the lotus flower begins as a closed bud and then it starts to blossom. And the interesting thing is that the lotus flower is a beautiful flower that grows in the mud, and it manages to flourish no matter where, even though it's not in the ideal, most ideal situations. So in the Eastern perspective, the idea of flourishing comes from this concept that we're living in a world that's essentially volatile, disruptive, and impermanent. It's constantly changing. So if the physical environment is constantly changing, how do we start to regulate our inner worlds so that we're able to flourish in the outside world? And that encompasses the idea of the physical, the mental, and the emotional.
Yeah, it's interesting that you bring that piece in, because I was also looking at the chat just now and things that have come up, how people relate to interconnectedness or, how do you connect to a common interconnectedness? That was the question. And a lot of things that came up was nature or even empathy, listening to others, and just reading a few of them. And here you are talking about non-violence to our own selves, basically not harming ourselves is as very simplistically put what self-care is about. In my own work around climate change coaching, which is a huge systemic topic, what I'm constantly coming up against is this feeling or this mindset of scarcity, not enough. Which meaning I am a small person, I'm an individual, is my contribution enough? I don't have enough money or resources to make a large impact. We don't have enough time. So you see this whole thing around enough and enoughness, or lack of something. That means I lack something or we lack something. And when we are talking about what it also does is, and this mindset spills over into the we part, that means our system is not enough, or we need, more to be done. We need, so there is this whole lack. So I wonder, how much of this is translating into or moving into the space of violence to our own self. That means, are we constantly moving into inaction? Are we moving into non-action, if I put it like that, where we freeze with this scarcity mindset, right? And another element which comes in, and Radhika, I will come to you in a moment around this piece, because you also mentioned we can keep going off-centered with things that are happening around us. So how do we center ourselves? How do we get back to our center, which will allow us to take some action? So you mentioned that piece. So maybe that's also one of the keys that can be used for this scarcity mindset. There is another little piece I wanted to bring in, because I know many of us, not only in the climate change, but otherwise as well, definitely have at some moment in time in our lives had this not enoughness, or I don't have enough, or I don't have the power, or I don't have enough power, maybe that concept come in. And there's something ringing in my background. I don't know if you can hear that. The other side of the scarcity, it's a very close cousin, is overwhelm. So when we get into this not enoughness piece, we can very quickly become overwhelmed with we are doomed, which is, what's happening in the climate change world as well. So we don't have, like I said, we don't have enough time. We are running out of time, and there's a whole lot of emotions and overwhelm that starts setting in, which is also taking away our power to take some action. So what I'm constantly seeing is this inaction. Not necessarily because we don't want to take action, but because we don't feel we have enough power to make any change. And Radhika, I wanted to bring you into this piece with the self part. I know you have this power, or I would say you have this insight into using our own self when it comes to scarcity and overwhelm. While I work as a coach, when I look at these big systemic mindsets or emotions coming up, what is the way in when we don't have a coach and we have these scarcity and overwhelm? How do we center ourselves?
Okay, so I'm going to kind of spin this a little bit. So going back not only just to your conversation, but to what I initially started out with. So in the Eastern perspective of, if I take the entire science of yoga, so yoga in India is not a physical practice, it's a life practice. The physical aspect of it is very, very small. So if all of us kind of bring ourselves onto the same page and come to the understanding that the first lesson that we learn in Eastern philosophy is that the physical environment is ever-changing, it's impermanent, and it's disruptive, right? So if you actually look at all of us as people, as human beings, everything that happens in the outside world, we react to in the inside world. So the inside world is the world of feelings, emotions, thoughts, whereas the physical environment is the outer world of events, physical material things and people. So whatever is happening in the outside world, we are reacting to or responding to in the inner world, right? However, the dilemma is that we are in a physical environment that's constantly changing. That's the law of the universe that we're living in. So really now when we come back to the self and coming back to your conversation about overwhelm and scarcity, when things in the physical environment do not go the way we anticipate it, right? So whether it's on our interactions with people or in issues that stresses that we're dealing with on a daily basis, or we're dealing with larger issues within communities, organizations, or globally, whether we look at, the SDGs or climate change or whatever it may be, things in the outside world are moving in a particular direction, and we are all reacting to it in the inside world. So if I again come back to the Eastern perspective, the idea is that how do we live our lives daily with the most amount of centeredness, clarity, and intelligence to navigate the outside world, right? So this idea of scarcity that, it's too stressful, I can't do it, etc., comes because the inner world is not well. It is not reached. We have not worked with our inner worlds to come to that state where we are grounded, centered, calm, and we have the focus and the clarity of mind to be able to look at issues that we are dealing with to overcome them. Right? And then the other interesting part to me is that in the Western world, we speak so much about meditation, right? And we talk about meditating, whereas actually meditation is by far the highest of the practices. And coming back to the Eastern way of doing things, there is a structured way of evolving the body, the mind, and the emotions. So if I go back to a lot of our ancient texts, and I'm specifically referring to the Yoga Sutras, which is the wisdom of the text, is that we first work on the physical dimension because we are familiar with our bodies. It's the easiest part for us to start to impact. So when we start to work on the well-being of the physical body, we strengthen the body enough to move into the breath. So we go from asana, which is the physical, to the pranayama, which is the breathing practices. Then we go into mindfulness. Mindfulness is the precursor to meditation. And then we go into the 3 stages of meditation. So, and I think that, Ruma, what would be great is that when we get into this conversation of scarcity, overwhelm, and inaction, we're able to kind of come to this place where we start to understand that in order at, coming to the idea of intentionality as well, in terms of how do we actually act or don't act with emphasis on, what is right for us in our journeys, whether it's in our daily journey or when we're coming together as a group to start to address larger issues.
Yeah, so why don't we get into the Everest? I mean, I know you went recently, you had this Everest trip, right? And something that you mentioned around and any of us who have had those kind of nature connections can identify with the story. So please, Radhika, go ahead. What was your learning from your Everest trip?
So 2 weeks ago, I actually, I'd done a 15-day trek to Mount Everest, and we chose a particularly difficult path, and the goal was to get to 21,500 feet, so about 6,200 meters. And you'll hear me coughing a little bit because I still have an altitude cough, and I was sharing actually with Ola and Fatima and Gerard that we had now been in high altitude for almost 10 days. We were at 50% oxygen levels. And you can look it up later, but there is one of the exciting parts about the trek was that we were going to cross the Chola Pass. So 3 days ago, I had developed an altitude cough, which happens because you're not breathing enough through the nostrils. So you open the mouth, and we were in sub-zero temperatures, and the cold air is coming into the chest. So we had to do an 11-hour trek, and we got to the base of Chola Pass, and I looked up and I thought, I looked at everybody and I said, you're kidding me, right? Because how do we even begin to climb this? And that day, I was feeling particularly low on energy. My body was not feeling right. I was not breathing enough. And I stood there with, one of the Sherpas, and already from a group of 16 people, out of the group of 16 people, 9 people called in the helicopter and they evacuated out. And I had that moment where I had 2 choices, that either I was going to join them and get, evacuate out, or I was going to, get onto this 11-hour climb. So I stood there completely overwhelmed. And in that moment, I made that decision that I was going to climb, cross Chola Pass. And I sort of, used my breath, centered myself. And the message that came up for me was 2. One was, don't focus on the destination because it's too overwhelming. Pick your milestones. So I literally said, okay, I'm going to go from A to B. I reached that milestone. And then I took a few seconds, 10, 15 seconds of a rest. And then I, kept going. And my second message was, get rid of the mind and hands and feet, hands and feet. So literally, I had to just put one foot in front of the other. My hands were grabbing the cable, and it was a very overwhelming climb. But 7 hours later, we reached the top, and then we had another 4 or 5 hours where we had to come down, which was as scary. And then we had to walk across a glacier. But it was the most incredible experience of my life, because it was such a fantastic life lesson for me in terms of everything that I've been teaching that sort of came into play in that very moment. And it was interesting because even the people who left, we had a discussion about this, and it was really impressive to see that they had, intentionally decided to make that choice, coming to the recognition that, what, we just don't have the mental or physical fitness for this experience.
Yeah, so the power of intention, which translates into the power of choice. So even those people who left by, through the helicopter or on the helicopter, the not shaming them or their own selves that, oh, I left, I didn't have courage enough to climb or to do what I set out to do. So that can also be wounding in a way, right? And that takes away power. So and that takes us off center as well. And if that starts happening, what we going back to the self-care and self-wounding and harming through these narratives around or maybe shame and guilt, and us projecting all of that outside in some form and shape. So that also gets us into, I would say, inaction or forced action. So that is, not using our intention or whatever choice we make at that moment in time, making it with an intention, even whether it is going ahead or exiting. So there is another thing, Radhika, that you mentioned was, at that Everest climb, you were overwhelmed, and you did bring in the word overwhelm. And there are a few things you just said, I did my breath work, centered myself, and then these 2 things came up. So there's clearly a way to work with overwhelm in a moment. Right. Yes. So shall we get into a practice around that?
Yeah, so Ruma, I think, before we get into the practice, I can just say I'd like to speak a little bit about this, because I think, in all my years, and it's now been 25 years of working with people from diverse backgrounds across countries, religions, cultures, leaders, housewives. And at the end of the day, about 6 or 7 years ago, we started, because we had, thousands of people that used to come through the Institute from around the world, we started to look at the things that were helping people, move to different levels, whether it was transformation or baby steps, etc. And I think that one of the most interesting aspects that has come up for me all of these years is this idea of whether it's overwhelm or fear or anger, there is this emotional reactivity, right? And we brought to the table, we sort of developed this technique called the purposeful pause technique. And that really has been instrumental in so many ways because, number one, when we all try to change mindsets and behaviors, right? And we want things to be different in our lives. I think there are two critical pieces of understanding. Number one is that wherever any of us are standing today, right, in our life right now, in the world right now, is due to a certain repetitive thoughts, emotions, and behaviors that have brought you up to this point. So again, coming back to the perspectives of, from Eastern philosophy or yoga, we're very clear that the mind is, your thoughts impact your emotions, and then your emotions impact your behaviors. And then your behaviors and the choices or decisions you make impact the quality of all your life experiences, right? So if I'm standing here today and I want to create change in my life because I don't like the way my career, my finances, my health, my relationships, I need to start to understand that I need to adopt new thoughts, new emotions, new mindsets, new behaviors, and new choices, because it's those three things that when it starts to set in motion, starts to create change. So a lot of people with the work that I've done, I see them get very frustrated because, today on New Year's, I made certain decisions, and then I come months or years down the road and I look back and not much has shifted. So I think the awareness, number one, that I need to create the change. So going back to what you said earlier, is that if I don't have access to a coach or to a counselor or a psychiatrist, whoever it may be, right, to that support, how do I start to empower myself to create change? So the purposeful pause technique is such a lovely technique because it's so simple to do. And really what it means is that when I am confronted by, something that derails me or takes me off center, then the first thing that I do is I become aware of my, me getting reactive or getting fearful or getting anxious, stressed. And once we come into that awareness, then we're moving into the breath. And I'd like to say a few words about the breath. The breath is by far your most powerful tool because you can't breathe in the future and you can't breathe in the past, right? Your breath is in the present. So when I'm starting to get reactive or fearful, if I take a moment just to connect with my physical body, my body allows me to start to become more centered. And then when we start to connect with the breath, because the breath is in the present, you're able to become present and much calmer. And really what the purposeful pause technique does, you think of a traffic light, red, yellow, green. So red means I'm not in a good state. So when I was standing at the base of Chola Pass, I knew there was fear, there was exhaustion, my mind was getting chaotic. So I knew, I have to stop the red light. Then the yellow space is the space that I'm resting in. So I take a few moments to connect with my physical body. I take a few moments to connect with my breath. I become present. I become more centered. And the green light means, okay, I'm ready to move. I'm ready to speak to somebody. I'm ready to make a decision. That purposeful pause technique can take you a few seconds, 10 seconds, or you might decide, it might take me a month before I make that decision, intentionality, right? And as we start to apply the purposeful pause technique in our daily lives, it is probably the most transformational tool because it allows you to not only bring awareness into all your interactions and all your decision making and into your own personal well-being, because essentially it's stopping you from becoming emotionally reactive. Taking that space to be non-violent first with myself so that I can have the clarity of thought to move forward, deciding what is best in the moment for me and everybody else around me. And I think that this is probably a good place for us to move into this idea of Ruma, which you and I were talking about, is the weight of the emotions, right? And how that plays out. And I think it would be great if you could say a couple of words about that.
You know, it's again, emotions, me and being in the corporate world for so long, we tend to mentalize a lot of how to handle emotions. We tend to, you know, link that and of course, thoughts and emotions, and change your thoughts and emotions will accordingly change. So a lot of work happens in that space. What I've also increasingly realized, when somebody brought in shadows in the chat window, yes, while working with shadows and all, these are important elements to work on, particularly when we're looking at systemic shifts or large changes. But what I've realized increasingly is this emotions, if I break that down, E as in energy in motion, emotion. So that essentially means that that energy needs to flow through something, or flow into something, or flow out of something. And a lot of our emotion bringing in the body into play when it comes to emotions. And trust me, in climate change coaching, I do come across such big emotions like anger, anxiety, grief, even, because, you know, a lot of us think that the world is, you know, already doomed. So there's this huge emotions that come up. So that can also freeze our actions in a big way. So these emotions, energy in motion, needs to be processed, and not processed always through the mind, but needs to be processed maybe in different ways. So part of our work, both yours and mine, Radhika, is around bringing in different perspectives. There is not only one way, there are other ways. And what you are talking about, the PPT, or the powerful pause technique, is one way to just pause a lot of the mind work and come into the space of mindfulness, and then maybe, you know, allow some processing to happen. So Radhika, are you going to take us through this body experience of emotions and how we can let that flow?
Right. And I just want to say something. I'm seeing lots of interesting stuff in the chat. After the mindfulness guided session, we're going to go into the breakout rooms, and then we're going to have 10-15 minutes to actually go through a lot of the questions. So if you could just be a little bit, give us some time for that. And just quickly now, because I have a minute before we start the session, just speaking to what Ruma is saying, one of the aspects of the Eastern philosophy that I love is playing with this idea of destiny. And really, you know, when we start to understand that every thought and every emotion and every behavior that's repetitive starts to create motion in a particular direction. It starts to build momentum. So if I go back again to my Everest example, what was my destiny? Was my destiny to cross Chola Pass, or was my destiny to get evacuated out, right? But at the end of the day, I made that mental, emotional, and physical commitment to climb something that was very daunting. And it was a series of actions that built upon the other that allowed me to reach what I can't even believe that I climbed today, right? So I think that, you know, this idea of destiny is such a beautiful conversation, because it's about every direction that you choose to take has a destination, right? So if I get onto a flight from Mumbai to New York, my destination is New York. If I decide to go visit, you know, Gerard in the Netherlands, I'm going to take another direction. So I think that I find it very empowering that, the Eastern philosophy looks at it as that you can literally, take into your own hands your destiny or your destination. And when we have the mental, emotional, and physical commitments, it's setting those repetitive thoughts, behaviors, and actions into motion, which will eventually lead you in the direction you want to go. It may not be exactly what you imagined it to be, but you are moving in the direction, and it's up to us to be flexible and navigate the very complex physical environment that we're living in so that we reach pretty much where we intended to go. And with that thought, maybe we can begin the mindfulness session. So I'm going to ask all of you to just sit in a comfortable seated position. Whether if you're sitting on a chair, make sure your feet are firmly placed on the ground, just relaxing the body. If some of you want to sit on a bed or even lie down, sit cross-legged, it's all yours. And I'm doing this with you, so please feel comfortable. And just relaxing your shoulders. If you want to sort of, just rotate your neck, your head a couple of times, do whatever you need to do to become comfortable. And I'm just going to invite everybody to just experience this and just reminding ourselves that we're trying to move into this space of interconnectedness and really understanding where we are in our journey of interconnectedness in our own self-care and relationship to the self. Going back to the, the first dimension in the IDG framework. Okay, so if we can just gently close our eyes. Just gently closing your eyes, relaxing your forehead, your facial muscles, and your jaw. Just softening the facial muscles of the face, allowing the eyes to be soft. I'm going to ask you to just take a moment and bring your attention to your jaw and just relaxing your jaw as well. And now very slowly bringing your awareness to your physical body and just taking a moment to connect with it. Become aware of the physical dimension. Start to notice any sensations, any discomfort, pain, stress, whatever may be coming up for you. So we're not judging anything, we're just observing and staying connected to the physical dimension. And now gently moving your awareness to your breath and start to feel your breath. So because we're born with the breath, we don't normally give the breath a lot of attention. So I'm going to ask you to start moving from unconscious to conscious breathing, where you start to feel each inhalation and exhalation and just start to observe the breath. Where does the breath begin? Where does it end? Is it difficult to breathe, easy to breathe? Is your breath shallow? Is it deep? And just make sure that you're feeling each inhalation and exhalation as you move into these observations. Now I want you to gently move your awareness to the mental dimension, to the mind space, and take a moment to observe all the thoughts that are coming up for you. Does your mind feel centered and calm? Is it chaotic, restless, empty? Just observe again, no judging, just observing. And now very gently bring your awareness to the emotional dimension and connect with how you're feeling right now. What kind of emotions are coming up for you? Are you feeling relaxed, stressed, centered, whatever it may be? And now we're going to take a few moments with our awareness to go deeper into ourselves, just allowing for a space of deeper connection, reflection, and really being able to create that space for interconnectedness with ourselves and others. So with each inhalation, I want you to go deeper into yourself, disconnecting from the outside world. And as you exhale, and you can either exhale through the mouth or the nostrils, I want you to gently breathe out far and wide. And with your breath, just allow yourself to let go of all your thoughts, emotions, and anything that's coming up for you physically. So while you're going to inhale through the nostrils, just allow yourself to let go, either through the mouth or the nostrils as you exhale. And with your exhalation breath, just letting go of all your thoughts, emotions, physical discomforts. And I want you to just take a few slow and deep inhalations and exhalations, just giving yourself permission to go deeper into the self. And then I want you to just stay there. Allow the breath to become slower and softer. Keep connecting with the breath because it roots you in the present. And now I want you to just connect with disempowering emotions like scarcity and overwhelm, could be anything else that come up for you on a regular basis. Don't try to think about this from your mind. Just allow yourself to feel these disempowering emotions that come up for you in your body. Stress, anxiety, overwhelm, fear, scarcity, whatever it may be. And I want you to just sit with these emotions for a few moments. We just allow ourselves to accept them, not push them away, just be with them. And as you stay with these emotions, I want you to start feeling the weight of these emotions in your body. How heavy are these emotions? Just feel the weight and feel what the weight of these emotions does to you, not only in your physical body, but in your physical environment, in your daily life, in your interactions with your family, your friends, your peers, your co-workers. Just stay with these emotions, feel the weight, not only in the physical body, but also in your environment. Where do they show up? And how do they show up? And now I want you to just recognize what the cost of these emotions are to you in your present life. Maybe you're experiencing fear, loss, grief, whatever it may be. Just allow yourself to accept these emotions, stay with them, and feel the weight of them. I want you to visualize these emotions as a giant snowball. And I want you to push this snowball or roll it along. And I want you to roll this snowball into your future 5 years down the road. And I want you to imagine these emotions just becoming bigger and bigger as you project 5 years into your life, into the future. And as you enter 5 years ahead, I want you to stop for a moment. And I want you to feel the weight of these emotions in your body. And as you feel the weight of these emotions in your body, I want you to look around you into your future. And I want you to ask yourself, what are these emotions costing you 5 years into your future? Yourself, your relationships, your environment. What is the role of these disempowering emotions in your life 5 years down the road? And now I want you to come back to your breath and feel your breath. And just ask yourself to give yourself permission to just let go of these emotions. And I want you to take a nice deep breath. And then very slowly on the exhalation, I want you to give yourself permission to let go of these emotions. Just take a few deep breaths, and you're even able to exhale out completely. And if you want, you can even take a deep breath in and go. Just do where you need to go. You can even shake your body a little bit and just allow these emotions to just completely let go, release them. Do whatever you need to do. You can shake your body, your arms, you can jump up and down, you can do whatever you need to do. You can breathe, you can cry, you can do whatever is needed. And now I'm going to ask everybody to stand up, and we're going to shake out our bodies. Do whatever you need to do and just shake out all of these emotions, allowing yourself to completely let go. So maybe we jump, we move, we just let go completely. We do this for another 10 seconds. And when you are ready, I'm going to ask you to sit back down. And just closing your eyes again, connecting with the breath and taking a few moments to go deeper into yourself. And now I'm going to ask you to visualize yourself laughing, joyous, abundant, happy, and you have the confidence, the power to just make those choices that are right for you, that empower you. You're thriving, you're flourishing, you're feeling joy and happiness and in every pore in your body. And I just want you to take a moment to feel the weight of empowered emotions in your body. What does it feel like? And now I want you to just look around you. What does your environment look like? Relationship to yourself, collaboration, relating to others, ability to think and act. What does your present look like? And now we're going to project 5 years into the future. And you're going to take these emotions with you, whatever they feel like with you. Maybe it's an arrow, a bird, whatever comes up for you. And as you move 5 years into the future, I want you to take a moment first and just connect with yourself. And what are these empowering emotions of gratitude, abundance, love, joy, connection? What does it feel like in your body? Feel it, breathe, stay centered. And now I want you to look at your environment. How do these empowered emotions show up not only with yourself, but in your relating to other people, in your environment, your immediate environment, and in a much larger environment? And then just moving inward back into that very quiet space that you always have access to. I want you to ask yourself, what are the 2 new emotions that yourself needs right now? What are the 2 new empowering emotions that you would like to create in your life, that becomes part of your DNA, your mental and emotional muscles? What are you choosing at this moment? And just a reminder that at the end of the day, destiny, destination is just a question of building momentum with our thoughts, our emotions, and actions. And you can begin these daily actions with baby steps, whatever's right for you. But at the end of the day, what is the awareness around the emotions that are supportive of us, that are non-violent to us, that are joyous, that we want to get up from this meditation with this intentionality? Just asking you to stay quietly with your inner space, breathing through it, relaxing completely. Honoring yourself. Honoring the space with gratitude that we are in today, feeling our interconnectedness with each other. And very slowly and gently connecting with the physical body. Connecting with your environment, and when you feel ready, gently opening your eyes. Welcome back. Ruma, I've gone over by a couple of minutes, so perhaps you could just lead into the next breakout room session.
Yeah, just a moment to take some deep breaths. And while you are all doing that, I think the next segment is about anchoring or zooming in on whatever you've heard so far. So if you could reflect on the question, what am I learning so far that I can use? Could be the PPT, powerful pause technique. Could be about pause. Yes. Purposeful pause. I'm at. So PPT, purposeful pause technique, yes. And or whether it is about scarcity, whether that's about overwhelm, whether that's about emotions, whether that's about your body, whatever it is that you're learning, it would be great to reflect on how that can be used practically at this point in time in your life. So take a moment to think around that, and we will put you into breakout rooms where you can discuss this with your partners in the room and see what comes up. Whether it is baby steps to practice powerful pause techniques. One of the ways Radhika and I, has used this purposeful pause technique is around having reminders, constant reminders to practice this red, orange, and green. Stop, rest, and then take action. So maybe reminding yourself multiple times during the day, or maybe 3 times during the day. So that's one way. Maybe having a buddy system to practice this, or maybe coming up with something creative altogether of how the purposeful pause technique can be practiced, if that is something that calls out to you, or any other learning and what you would like to, on how you would like to convert that into some sort of action in a daily life. So please do reflect on that, and we will put you into discussion, into breakout rooms for, shall we say, 10 minutes, 5 minutes each way. Sorry, not 5 minutes each way, 10 minutes, depending on how many people you have in the room. Make sure everybody has some speaking time. Right, welcome back. We would like to, for the next 8 minutes or so, we'd like to open up this discussion for any questions, any inputs, any comments.
So Ruma, yeah, that's a good idea. And also there are a couple of questions that are interesting to answer. So we'd love to hear about some of your thoughts as well, yeah, and discussions.
Maybe I can, I was in a little room outside, it's quite interesting already sharing what I can do, that the PPT, so to speak of, was considered a very powerful tool. And so for yourself and apply it in groups. So that was one of the things. And the other group I jumped on board a little bit is about, I think, a similar experience and also experience what people already had, but then, hey, there are new bits and pieces what we can do. And of course, important that you also practice it yourself and not only teaching it. That was also one of the statements we had in one of the groups. It's quite interesting thing to see that happening.
Anybody else? Okay, so there's actually some very interesting questions in the chat box, and I'm tempted to answer. I think I'm going to answer the more complicated one. And that question was, so the Yoga Sutras is the ancient text. It is the wisdom behind the life practice of yoga, where the physical practice of yoga is less than 5%. So let's imagine that 95% of this text is to guide us in how to live in this very complex physical environment, and how do we actually evolve the mind, the body, and the emotions to reach our optimal space, that self, so that we can, navigate with ease. So what's really important for us to understand is really what the guidance around the subject is, that it's not about you not living your life with passion or not feeling, emotions of anger, fear, etc. The entire practice of mindfulness is based on the fact that can we as human beings feel the full gamut of emotions, whether it's grief, joy, fear, etc., and still live our life with fullness. But a lot of us end up getting stuck and not living the lives that we want to live. So the question was, can you refer to or speak of the Yoga Sutras? So the Yoga Sutras are little aphorisms. They are statements, and there's 196 of them that relate to daily life. So the question was, and I think Charles asked this, is that can you speak about those Yoga Sutras that would relate to the IDGs? So yes. If you understand the first 3 Yoga Sutras, you literally do not even read the rest of the text. So the first Yoga Sutra 1.1 is Yoga Atha Anushrasanam, which means the power of the now, that the moment lies in the power of the now, right? But now has many different meanings. One is that now is the only moment in which you actually have any power, because the past is irrelevant. The future, you might have an intention about it, but you don't really know how it's going to unfold. And now also refers to this idea of you don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. So by being present, you can actually live your life to the fullest. And it really is the most important moment in your life. And we, of course, intellectually know this. And while there is while there's nothing stopping you from creating your future, it's very important that we understand that really the power is in the now. So how to relate to the IDG framework? It's really the relationship to the self, right? This is the beginning of our journey where before we can go out and do really big and important things, how are we honoring ourselves to live in the moment and putting in that time and effort to stop living in the past or the future? Because the joy of life is right here, right now. The second Yoga Sutra is Chitta Vritti Nirodha, which means that I'm going to speak about all three of them separately and then bring them together. Chitta Vritti Nirodha means the cessation of the personality complex and the mind field. And while this is a really long discussion, to simplify it, really what yoga is saying to us, this philosophy is saying to us, is that when the mind is active, and we're living in a very base level. So how do you actually move along in this journey of life without overthinking and analyzing everything, right? So it connects back to sutra number 1, which is how do I learn to become much more present, centered, and aware so that I can use my current moment to navigate and move forward, not only in the most joyous way, but with discernment and intelligence. And then the final, the third sutra, 1.3, refers to the fact that when we live in the present and when we are able to regulate the mind and emotions and be in a much more calm and centered way, then we start to access higher levels of consciousness, right? So I think we all can relate to this, is that when we are very anxious or stressed and we're not present, then, we're very scattered, right? So if you now start to see how all three sutras come together, number 1, the journey begins, the first thing that we need to do is to start to become present. And I'm going to touch upon the other question that was asked, which was how does the eightfold path of Patanjali come into this? Patanjali is considered to be the author, but it was actually a family who compiled the Yoga Sutras. So in the Eightfold Path, he first talks about something called the Yam and the Niyams, which is really the modality with which we live our lives and function in the physical environment, and how he explains to us to take care of the health of our body. And it's too much for me to get into, but then we get into asana, which is the physical. So really understanding that our personal well-being begins with the physical dimension, how much you're moving, what you are eating, sleeping, etc. Because your state is by far the most important gift that you can give yourself. So I see all the time people struggling with, why can't I meditate? I'm not very present, etc. People get into stress states, exhausted states, etc. But when we get into make the commitment that my physical dimension, my movement, what I'm eating, what I'm drinking, how much I'm taking care of myself, becomes the foundation for this journey. So if I don't have good physical well-being, my ability to be present, Sutra number 1.1, Yoga Atha Anushasanam, cannot happen. The power of the now is not possible because physically I am not in my best state. Then he says, then in the Eightfold Path, we move into pranayama, which is the breathing practices. The breath, so the body is the gateway to the breath. So as the physical body becomes stronger, and if you look at the physical practice of yoga, we move forward, backwards, sideways, etc. And actually the reason for that was to strengthen the muscles involved in breathing. So the state of pranayama, your breathing practices can only become much more stronger and advanced, and your breath can only flow much more easily is when the physical body is in good state. So we know that when we are sick, when we have a cold, your breath is not flowing well, which is why he gives the emphasis to the physical state of being. Then we move into pranayama. So the body becomes the gateway to the breath, and the breath is the gateway to the mind. So I use the power of the breath of becoming aware and centered and present, which then allows me to develop mindfulness. Now, here's another really interesting aspect. When the West uses mindfulness, we talk about becoming aware of everything that's happening inside of you and around you. And while that is absolutely correct, the actual idea behind the practice of mindfulness is the Sanskrit word smriti, which means recollection. I must be in a physical, mental, and emotional state to remember not to repeat those mental, emotional, and behavioral patterns that are keeping me stuck in my life. So the practice of mindfulness actually is to remind yourself. So you remember earlier I talked about the fact that every one of you can ask yourself, where am I standing right now? All your thoughts, emotions, and behaviors have brought you to this moment in time. So let's say somebody says, I want more abundance of financial wealth or love or health, whatever it may be, right? Now, in order for me to be able to create those new things in my life, to bring more abundance in my life, or to bring more gratitude, less fear, whatever it may be, I have to remember not to keep repeating those same thoughts and emotions. So science knows today that our brains have already created neural pathways. And in order for us to create new mindsets and behaviors, we actually have to disentangle those neural pathways and form new ones. So in order for a new behavior or a new, a new behavior or new emotions to come into place, so we ended with choosing new empowering emotions, I need my brain to start disentangling with its associations. So we know that neurons have to first fire together, which means I have to repeat them enough times before they start to wire together. So the practice of mindfulness, recollection, is that in that moment where I'm faced with fear, stress, anxiety, I'm able to use the purposeful pause technique, my breath, come to a place of centeredness, and then I tell myself that if I repeat this behavior, anger, lifestyle choices, whatever it may be, I'm only perpetuating the way things are, and 2 and 3 years down the road, nothing has changed. So when I go back to the sutras or the Eightfold Path, it's very important that we become present. And when you become present, that's where your power is to remember, how are all of us, what are the goals that we are working on right now, right? We're trying to now start creating momentum even with the IDG framework. So what are those actions that we are taking ownership for? Or what are those actions in my life that I want to change so that I can have a better relationship with myself, with everybody around me? So the idea of mindfulness, while it is also about awareness, it is the practice of recollection. We can spend a lifetime in the practice of mindfulness. And then come the 3 stages of meditation, which is Pratyahara, Dharana, Dhyana, Pratyahara, Dharana, Dhyana, which means that I first have to be able to focus on the object. And then I'm able to withdraw into myself. And then meditation means a state of no mind, zero thought. But guess what? If all of us are living in the physical world, being in a state of meditation, the way it is actually described in the Yoga Sutras, is not possible. So which is why if you go to the text is broken up into 4 chapters, where chapter 1 is written for the mystic, somebody who says, you know what, I'm done with life. I've been there, done that, I've tasted it, I've enjoyed it, and now I want to move into meditation, into a state of no mind, so I'm dissolving the self. I'm not there yet. So I go to chapter 2. And chapter 2 is the yoga of action for people like you and me who are involved and engaged in the physical environment. We're not expected to reach a state of no mind. It does not mean that we don't sit with ourselves quietly every day, cultivating that space for quietness, reflection, inquiry, etc. But meditation is actually the most misused word in this journey in the Western world. We're actually doing mindfulness. I think I need to wrap up, and there's the afterglow session. So I will hand it over to, Fatima, Gerard. I know we've kind of gone over, but we're inviting all the IDG members to sign up for our digital platform called Just Breathe. It's free and it's self-paced learning journeys to help you with your personal well-being and becoming much more mindful. I'm going to quickly place the link in the chat. It costs you nothing, and we hope to see more of you.
Thank you so much, Radhika, and also to Gerard and Ruma for really, diving in deep. And I know there's a lot of action and reaction in the chat, and a lot of exploration wanting to happen. So what we said is that we'll save the chat, and also if you would like to be followed up on your chat messages, please provide us with your contact info, maybe in a direct message or so, and we can follow up on that. And also we have the time for the afterglow, just the coming half hour or so. So there's more more chance to follow up. And for the afterglow, we will have breakout rooms available for people to join as you wish. And there will be a particular breakout room for those of you interested in talking about the hubs and joining or starting a new hub. You can join that together with Pontus, who's coordinating that work globally. And Radhika, you and Ruma and Gerard will be hanging around, and either here in the main room or joining a breakout as well. So we have a lot of things coming up in the Inner Development Goals movement.
Yeah, so we want to highlight 3 of them. The first one is the 15th of December, already next week. The first phase with IDGs was about to find out which IDGs were actually the ones that became the 23 IDGs we're using today. There's maybe a 24th coming up, a secret. The second phase was about looking at different methods. So we have created a toolkit, and it's not like this is the truth and you have to follow these methods. It's more like if you need to dive into the IDGs more, you can look in the toolkit and see is there something for me. I was thinking about one tool is listening to pause, and maybe using this purposeful pause technique during that listening to pause technique. Maybe they can combine. So there are many interesting tools to look upon and see if they're suitable for you. And the launch is the 15th of December at 3 o'clock. It's on our website, and you will find a link here also. The next gathering is going to be the 24th of January, and we have a beautiful cliffhanger from Radhika now, because it's about mindfulness. The title is Transforming Ourselves with Mindful Self-Compassion, and it's PhD Chris Germer who's going to talk about mindful self-compassion. So the perfect follow-up from this. And we also want to say that now the sales are open for the tickets for the next summit. It's the 11th and 11th and 12th of October next year. But already now you can buy both Zoom participation, but also the live participation at Circus here in Stockholm. It's going to be an amazing event. So dear IDG friends, thank you for this. We will wrap up now the formal session. And thank you, Ola. And thank you, Staffan, who is next to us here for this. And thank you all for participating. And thank you, Radhika and Gerard and Ruma. And we will now go into the afterglow. So we can all say, unmute and say goodbye in our own language. And you who want to hang around, you just stay here. So thank you. Tack.
Gracias.
Thank you.
Goodbye. Bye-bye.
Hej då. Tack så jättemycket.
Shukran. Moltes gràcies.
Thank you.
Arigato.
Gracias.